James going to join in too.
Right for that.
All faces. Be like back in class. The crowd bands,
Honourable members, the Deputy Speaker.
Are there any constituency statements by honourable members? And I call the member for Newcastle.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Well, this government likes to talk a big game about supporting the regions, but deep down, they're only in it for themselves. Mr Morrison and his mates spend taxpayers' money like it's Liberal Party money, while regional communities like Newcastle get left behind. On Monday, in the Newcastle Herald, the Nationals candidate for the Hunter called for funding to support the expansion of the Newcastle Art Gallery. According to the article, the Nationals candidate, and I quote, spoke with the Deputy Prime Minister Barnaby Joyce about securing funds for the project after its $10 million Building Better Regions application was unsuccessful. Honestly, you could not make this stuff up. It was, of course, his own beloved National Party that had just awarded $300 million of taxpayers' money to coalition-targeted seats. I have long advocated for the expansion of the Newcastle Art Gallery. It's a compelling project that I've often brought to the attention of this parliament and the minister directly in a bid to secure funds, including in the most recent round of the Building Better Regions Fund. But who knows, perhaps the Nationals candidate has secured himself a sneak peek at the next edition of the pink and green colour-coded spreadsheet, or he might have time booked in the minister's diary for a sneaky meeting to go lobby behind closed doors. Let's not forget, the government has still refused to tell us what projects were cut and denied funding because they clearly didn't match up with the Morrison government's agenda. How many more projects in my community, like the Newcastle Art Gallery, the Victoria Theatre, the Newcastle Business Club, Newcastle Business Centre, have been passed over for projects in coalition seats, despite them being tainted pink? Coming off the back of the sports rorts, which saw Newcastle Olympic Football Club dudded of their funding, even though the department found their excellent project to be completely worthy, Newcastle's fallen victim to another round of regional rorts. This is why the Morrison-Joyce government won't introduce an independent National Integrity Commission with teeth, because it will get in the way of all this rorting business. Even before these latest revelations, the Australian National Audit Office had already announced that they were auditing this billion-dollar program. Since the creation of the Building Better Regions Fund in 2018, 90%, that's right, 90% of all funding has gone to coalition-held and targeted seats. Seriously, how is this justifiable as a regional development policy? Well, it's not. It is not a fair policy. It is not a transparent policy. It is a rort through and through. This is not about doing what is right for the regions. It's all about keeping this government in power with Australian taxpayers footing the bill.
Time has expired. I call the member for Stirling.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Well, this month marks a significant milestone for many of the community organisations in my electorate of Stirling, many of whom are doing incredible work and have been active within our community for decades. To have withstood the test of time and multiple challenges that come with it, in particular COVID-19, is a significant achievement in itself. But to serve the community and deliver positive outcomes to local communities and families is absolutely admirable. And a few weeks ago, I attended Magella Catholic Primary School to join them in their 50th year celebratory Mass. And it was really heartening to speak with the students as well as the teachers past and present at this momentous milestone and see just how passionate and dedicated the staff, the priests and other assistants throughout the school are to their community. And on a tour of the school later that day with Principal David Burns, I had the opportunity to see some of the infrastructure and facilities which the Morrison government has supported the construction of, and also to hear about the school's vision for the future. So well done to David and the Magella team for the hard work and dedication that you put in to make the community a real hub, particularly for the multicultural students and families. Later that same day, I was just down the road at Nollamurra, where I joined Uniting Aid, who was celebrating their 40th anniversary, not quite at the 50th years of Magella, but they're catching up, Deputy Speaker. And I'd like to acknowledge Uniting Aid for their team of dedicated individuals and continued service to the disadvantaged people living in my electorate of Stirling. This amazing organisation has provided support and emergency relief to those in need, including food, clothing, household goods, financial assistance with utility bills. And in particular, in recognising the volunteers, I recognise a couple of the very special volunteers, Karis Page and Wendy Gardner. And on the 40th anniversary celebrations, it was really an honour to recognise Wendy and Karis and pay tribute to their hard work over many, many years. And Deputy Speaker, this weekend, Hammersley Scout Group will celebrate their 50th anniversary with a community open day. And I'd like to commend this organisation for their fantastic work in providing young boys and girls with the skills that they need as they emerge as our future leaders. And it's local groups, organisations and schools like these in Stirling that are the lifeblood of our communities, providing wonderful opportunities and support to both their neighbours, to those in need and to the next generation of young Australians.
I call the member for Bendigo.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Well, this parliament, during this pandemic crisis, it really has shone a light on how important local manufacturing is and how important sovereign capability is. And I do acknowledge that when the pandemic first hit and the whole world scrambled to secure predominantly their medical supplies, everything from nasal swabs to hand sanitizer to face masks, there was a real urgent push to develop our PPE manufacturing capability in this country. It was a real warning shot to Australians and to the Australian government and Australian industry that we've lost our sovereign capability, we've lost our supply chains, we've lost the ability to properly prepare. That has come at a huge cost to Australians, to Australian taxpayers and to this government. But yet, rather than seeing that ongoing continuing investment, ensuring that we secure our supply chains now and into the future, we've seen those supply chains already starting to drop off. What I'm hearing from local manufacturers and manufacturers across the country is that the contracts that they secured at the beginning of the pandemic, they haven't been renewed. As the supply chains in China come on, come off, people have gone back to their old suppliers or found new suppliers, but they are unreliable, as we know. This government has left them high and dry. They invested in new equipment, they pivoted from what they were manufacturing to new manufacturing, but when that first critical contract ended, there was no second contract or third contract. It's disappointing that we've had a real lack of national leadership to secure our supply chains. It's not just PPE. We have massive issues throughout our economy, and that's going to be a hit to productivity, it's going to be a hit to costs, it's going to inflate the costs of many things. For example, construction. We debated this week in this chamber the issue of the timber supply issues that we're having across Australia. That's impacting my electorate as well. One of the main issues that manufacturers in my part of the world raise with me is the cost of freight. It has gone through the roof. And as one manufacturer said to me, there's been a complete lack of national leadership when it comes to freight, from our truck drivers who are the ones getting COVID and taking it interstate and not having them immunised first. They've never been in category 1A or B, yet they are responsible for getting product around this country, to the materials coming in from overseas. On this government's watch, we've lost our sovereign shipping capability. Where's the leadership on that issue? There's a lot that we need to be doing to secure now so that we have a safer future. Yet all we've seen from this government is spin and distraction, and no real commitment to securing manufacturing and securing our supply chains from freight to the front door.
I call the member for Groom.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. Successful projects under round 5 of the Building Better Regions Fund have been announced, and I'm very excited to share that my region will benefit from more than $5 million in funding. It's wonderful to hear Labor push down, as they always do, the hard-working efforts of the people who fought to get this funding, the community members who did the hard work to get this funding. And I want them to hear that. I want them to hear that, Mr Speaker, because that's what Labor thinks of them. They absolutely think everything should be controlled by some other way. This is people reaching out and doing the hard work of it. And I'm going to recount some of those, Mr Speaker. It's absolutely shameful that the work of these people getting spoken down by Labor like that. We've got the Great Divide mountain bike destination. Now, this is a project that has come from the community. This is the Toowoomba mountain bike community. Over 20 years have slowly built up the case for this, bit by bit, as they've made these paths themselves, working very closely with council, with the local environmental groups to get the paths agreed, to get them in place. They've built up a community that supports them, and I'm very, very happy to have stood beside them on the day that this announcement came through for the funding for them. This is a community-led project. These are community members who have fought for their place to get this funding, and they absolutely deserve it. It's fantastic to see them, and it's mountain biking, not motorbiking, Mr Deputy Speaker, very, very safe. Another great project that we have is the Darling Downs Health Museum. This was fought for by the Toowoomba Hospital Foundation at the Bailey Henderson site. Toowoomba's got a fantastic reputation for its long history of providing great health care throughout a huge part of Western Queensland and right down into northern New South Wales. In fact, where my family came from, Delungra, Moree, big operations were sent to Toowoomba first. Toowoomba's got this great history. It's wonderful for this museum to get its place so that we can bring together those memories. They're on the site of Bailey Henderson. We look forward now to the Premier of Queensland coming on board and funding the Queensland Hospital that we need. The new hospital Toowoomba needs, $1.2 billion worth there. I'm sure that will happen any day now. It's also great to see $1 million go towards the construction of the Indoor Bowls Club at Club Toowoomba. This is a great project that has brought together clubs that were struggling, small clubs that were struggling across the Toowoomba region with the debts required to keep these assets alive, keep them open. And Club Toowoomba's brought them together under one place, and I'm very happy to see them get and fight for this funding for an indoor bowls arena. Now, these bowls clubs have huge histories in Toowoomba. It's an incredibly popular pastime in our region. It's wonderful now that the future of these clubs has been secured with this great piece of infrastructure. $1 million going to Club Toowoomba. Great job from everybody there. And the last one is quite exciting. This is Meat Stock 2022, a Toowoomba Regional Council project that will receive $25,000 to keep them on track.
Thank the member for Groom, and I just advise him that I'm good at crashing mountain bikes as well as motorbikes. I give the call to the member for Melbourne.
I rise today to express my and the Greens' strong support for the 2 requests in the Noise Pollution from Brisbane Airport's flight parts petition tabled in this place in September. The 2,455 signatories had 2 reasonable requests. 1, amend the Air Services Act to free Air Services Australia from its regulatory capture by the aviation industry and ensure it protects the human and natural environment, community amenity and residential areas from the effect of the operation and use of aircraft. And 2, review to what extent the ministerial approval granted in 2007 relied on flawed and misleading data, with a view to revoke the approval of the current aviation airspace management plan for Brisbane Airport. Local communities in Brisbane dealing with significant noise pollution due to the second runway and subsequent changes to flight paths approved by this federal government. Earlier this week, hundreds of Brisbane residents joined the Greens candidate for the seat of Griffith Max Chandler Mather in a large rally against unsustainable aircraft noise. As Max Chandler Mather pointed out, it's important to emphasise that this fight isn't just about the tens of thousands of residents directly affected right now, but about the very future of Brisbane. And as a Member of Parliament who's supported the battles of Melbourne residents against aircraft noise, I understand the community concern and the importance of this fight. So I want to commend the residents who are willing to fight to win this battle, and I want to add my voice and the Greens' strength to their cause. What's happening right now in the Park Hotel in Melbourne marks yet another dark chapter in this country's bipartisan, cruel treatment of asylum seekers and refugees. At least 21 of the 46 refugees held there have tested positive to COVID-19. One is in hospital. The rest believe that infection is inevitable and that their lives are in immediate danger. The government was warned this would happen. They were warned that this super infectious virus would run rampant in the unventilated hotel rooms. It's a COVID incubator, but they didn't care. They chose not to act. These people came here seeking our protection. They were sent offshore to camps that the Labor Party set up. And then, since they came here, the government has completely and utterly failed them. People in my electorate of Melbourne had to summon everything they had to get through all 263 days of lockdown, and many couldn't imagine even just one more day. But these men have been in detention for 8 years. 8 years. Some arrived as boys and they are now men. Haven't they suffered enough? We know the government can fix this. They released many of the Medivac refugees from the Park Hotel 8 months ago. They can do it again. With the stroke of a pen, they could grant them permanent protection, get them the treatment they need, and let them safely join the community. We cannot take back the years of suffering, but we can stop their torture today. The name of the hospitalised asylum seeker is Mohammed Sarabi. Prior to contacting the virus, he'd requested a vaccine, and he's now saying, I don't know what to say, I'm just trying to breathe. Let them stay, get them the help they need, close the camps.
I call the member for McKellar.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I rise today to recognise the efforts of all the individuals involved with surf lifesaving on the Northern Beaches and to congratulate the winners of the annual Branch Awards of Excellence. This year, the awards were held online on the 6th of August, where lifesavers and youth lifesavers were recognised for their contributions and achievements. The awards provide an opportunity to recognise the efforts of all volunteers to keep beachgoers safe and their commitment to the local community. These are members who donate their time and go the extra mile in their contributions to surf lifesaving. Their dedication ensures that each beachgoer in our community is safe when they spend a day at the beach. The award saw Warriewood Surf Lifesaving Club secure Club of the Year. This year, an honour which recognises the commitment of the club to its members and the wider community. I congratulate all the winners and wish them all the best as they progress to the Surf Life Saving, that pun on life and life, Saving New South Wales Awards of Excellence to go up against other branches in the state. I particularly want to recognise their efforts during the lockdown to ensure that our community stayed together. Indeed, Mr Deputy Speaker, when the Northern Beaches was locked down over Christmas and New Year, a matter that was bemoaned by so many others, there were members of my community who saw it as an opportunity to make sure that the beaches remain the way they should be for locals and surf lifesaving. But when we reopened to the rest of the world, surf lifesavers were there on that weekend and every weekend subsequently to make sure that our beaches were kept clean and were kept safe for anyone from anywhere who wanted to enjoy our beaches and the beaches that Australia is so lucky to have. Thank you.
I call the member for Dunkley.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Australia faces a skills shortage today, but we also face a shortage of skills that we need for tomorrow. Our skills system suffers from a lack of planning so that we can meet business needs, so that we can help people of all ages to make good decisions about their skills needs, so that we can ensure that our economy is building the workforce it needs, not just for today, but for tomorrow. We know that our economy is changing, and we know that it brings with it new policy needs in the digital economy, the clean economy, in health and care, in new manufacturing. This changing world can no longer afford a lazy, passive government with no sense of aspiration and purpose, because the Australian people and Australian businesses and Australian investors and Australian communities, they all want to aspire and have a sense of purpose and have a government that joins them in it. In my electorate, the Carrum Downs and Seaford industrial precincts are hubs of new manufacturing. These are committed businesses and workers. They want to see a commitment to a future made in Australia. They want the skills system to work for them. They want a federal government that is on their side. They need a federal Labor government. They want Australia to take climate crisis as an opportunity to become a renewable manufacturing superpower. They want commitment to net zero by 2050 to be more than mere words. A changing economy creates new opportunities and with it new needs. The next generation of jobs, investment and export opportunities demands that we bring skills and industry policy together to always be planning for the needs of today and tomorrow, because that's what Labor governments do. Skills policy can enable many more workers to participate productively in new industries, but we will need to do some things differently. We might need to look at new frameworks of micro-credentials, for example, that could be stacked into full qualifications. We need to foster practical options at the local levels, in our suburbs, in our regions and through our TAFEs, always with our public TAFEs at the heart of it. Recently, I held a manufacturing roundtable with local manufacturers from Carrum and Seaford. The most common theme was a lack of skilled workers. Spiral staircases in Carrum Downs cannot find welders, cannot find local qualified welders. How could that be? In fact, the situation is so dire that the South East Melbourne Manufacturing Association is developing a pilot for micro-credentials, and I'm meeting with them and Richard Miles soon to discuss the project. We need to take this opportunity to fundamentally rethink how we train our own people. We need to reimagine and rebuild our own skills system after the Joyce Morrison government's savage treatment of our public universities and our public TAFEs. That's why Labor has a plan for a future made in Australia, a national rail manufacturing plan, a defence industry development strategy, an Australian skills strategy, and a 10-point Buy Australia plan to leverage investment by government for future skills and work for Australian communities. That's what my community needs. That's what Australia needs.
Time has expired. I call the member for Banks.
Well, thank you, Deputy Speaker. On the 29th of September, I met with Jackie McCann, the president of St Christopher's Netball Club. And of course, St Christopher's is one of the strongest netball clubs anywhere in the Canterbury Bankstown region. And St Christopher's itself actually provides some of the strongest clubs across pretty much every sporting code, be it football, cricket or rugby league. And it was really good to talk with Jackie to find out about the plans for next season. Obviously a difficult time this year with the season being cut short, but it was really good to hear about the plans for next year and some of the recent successes. Congratulations to Amelia Kurgan from St Christopher's Netball, who was recently selected in the Australian under-17 squad for netball. So a fantastic achievement and a great testament to everyone at St Christopher's. Since 1965, a fantastic and very important netball club in our local community. Deputy Speaker, Hurstville United Rugby League Club is a fantastic club, and it's really good every year to go along to the awards ceremony and present the Bank's Outstanding Sporting Achievement Awards. And recently I've been chatting with the President Holika to Alpha about various issues of importance to the club. One of the issues, Deputy Speaker, is the need for a high-quality home for junior rugby league in the St George district. Of course, we're fortunate to have Cogra Jubilee Oval for the Dragons and for other senior teams, but there is a need for a facility for the junior rugby league in the area, a place they can call home. So it's been really good to talk with Holika and other members of St George junior rugby league clubs on that very important topic, and look forward to doing more work on that issue in the future. Deputy Speaker, the Forest Rangers are one of the biggest sporting clubs anywhere in the St George region in any code. They have been on an absolute growth tear in recent years, Deputy Speaker. About 1,000 players in Forest Rangers down there at Gannons Park. And it was good to catch up with Con Soros, the President, recently, and we talked through various issues of concern down at Gannons Park. Now, Gannons, of course, houses more football players than any other park anywhere in St George, and I suspect there would be very few places anywhere in Sydney that call more football players home than Gannons Park. More than 1,500 players across Forest and Lugano FC. And it's really important that all of those recent improvements to Gannons are built upon, that the pitch retains the good quality condition that it was in after the big renovation and irrigation project. And so it was good to talk to Con about those issues and look forward to continuing to work with Forest Rangers.
I call the member for Gellibrand.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Well, yesterday was a grim day in the global battle against climate change. In the lead up to the Glasgow Climate Conference, scientists have confirmed that the current emissions reduction commitments of governments around the world would see us on track for 2.7 degrees of global warming by 2100. This would be a global catastrophe and would radically change the Australian way of life for our children. Now, in spite of this, we also saw it confirmed yesterday that the Morrison-Joyce government will go to the Glasgow conference with a 2030 emissions reduction target that was set by climate change denier Tony Abbott as Prime Minister. We saw the Morrison-Joyce government announce a commitment to a target of net zero emissions by 2050 yesterday, but then release no detail of how it will be achieved, no modelling of what it will cost, no new money to achieve the target and no new legislation to enshrine the target. What little detail there was in the Prime Minister's new pamphlet was laughable. 85% of the emissions reductions to 2050 identified in the Prime Minister's pamphlet came from, quote, existing policies. That would be the existing climate change policies like the Renewable Energy Target, the Clean Energy Finance Corporation and the Australian Renewable Energy Agency, policies that every member of the Abbott-Turnbull-Morrison government went to the 2013 election opposing and then spent years trying to destroy. The other 15% came from, quote, further technology breakthroughs, technological innovations that they are simply hoping will happen over the next 30 years to get them to net zero. In other words, it's magic beans. They are hoping for magic beans to come and save them. Now, a lot of thought had been put into the marketing of this announcement, though. There was a glossy brochure. There was a new slogan, pinched from the Qantas in-flight magazine, indeed, the Australian way. There was relentless messaging discipline, with the PM and his minister insisting 100 times in a single press conference that his pamphlet was not just a pamphlet, it was, quote, a plan. Australians won't be fooled by this scam. They want an Australian government that is serious about us doing our bit to tackle climate change, not just empty rhetoric. They want a Prime Minister who will lead on this issue, not be led. They recognise that the world's climate emergency is Australia's jobs opportunity. And Albanese Labor government has always believed, the Albanese Labor has always believed in net zero by 2050. We didn't have to be dragged there. We've already said that we'll invest $20 billion to rewire the nation, upgrading our national electricity grid to harness Australia's potential as a renewable energy superpower, to drive down power prices and create thousands of new jobs, particularly in the regions. We will connect... Rewiring the nation is the most important investment we can make in the renewable energy capability of this nation. It is a no-brainer. Even those opposite should be able to understand it. We'll connect 100,000 homes using 400 community batteries and we'll provide tax cuts for electric vehicles and embrace the Australian weekend. The next election will be a choice and Australians will support Labor.
Member for Petrie.
Thanks, Mr Deputy Speaker. I feel compelled to discuss this today, but I do so with a heavy heart. I use these opportunities to speak in the chamber about positive things happening in my electorate of Petrie, so it saddens me to break from this. On March 31, 2016, in the suburb of Kippering in my electorate, a jealous man, Arona Peniamina, stabbed his wife 29 times with a kitchen knife. With such rage, he left the tip of the kitchen knife wedged in her head. Sandra Peniamina still bravely tried to escape, but on the family's driveway he finally killed his wife by smashing her head with a bollard. The court heard that Mr Peniamina believed his wife was having an affair and that the children would be taken from him. That Supreme Court jury found him not guilty of murder but manslaughter. I cannot fathom their thinking by bringing that decision down, but I do know that we have failed Sandra and we have failed her children, and we are continuing to fail as a society by allowing that violence to go insufficiently punished. Now, we want to go further on this, Mr Deputy Speaker. This man was not an Australian citizen, and in the Senate this sitting period we failed federally when members, Labor senators and Greens, defeated the Morrison government's strengthening character test bill to protect Australians against people who commit serious crimes against them, to protect Australians from the most serious offences and the most serious crimes committed by non-citizens, people who are guests of Australia, or prevent them from ever coming here in the first place. Penny Amina was not an Australian citizen. He had been afforded the privilege to live in Australia with all the good fortune that brings, and he forfeited that right when he brutally ended his wife's life. Our legal system sees the states and territories controlling the laws the courts abide by, but federally we do control our immigration laws, and members of the Morrison government take very seriously the responsibility to protect our community's safety from serious criminal and national security threats. The migration amendment sought to consider visa cancellation or refusal where a non-citizen has been convicted of offences involving violence against a person, weapons, breaking of an apprehended violence order or similar or non-consensual sexual acts. Australia, Mr Deputy Speaker, is not alone in demanding this of its visa standards. We are seeing more and more examples in our judicial system of violent criminals getting sentences under the current 12-month sentencing test. And if they are not Australian citizens, we want the right to cancel their visa and kick them out of the country. What are we doing here as representatives of our electorates if we can't pass bills that protect them from violent criminals? Shame on Labor and the Greens with this one. Arona Penny Amina revoked his right to enjoy Australia's hospitality, and we do not want the likes of him here.
I call the member for Chifley.
Thanks, Deputy Speaker. It's a real pleasure to deliver the following speech prepared by Erica Yu, an 18-year-old student from the Chifley electorate, and I want to thank her in advance for the thoughtful words. Writes Erica, when asked what I want Australia to look like in 20 years, I could list all the things that need improving, from addressing the housing crisis to addressing the climate crisis and the hopeful restoration of colour in the Great Barrier Reef, the eradication of period poverty to the improvement of education to do with day-to-day matters, particularly that of sexual health and well-being, from the decrease in mental health issues to an equal and equitable society where value is not dependent on age, race, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, religion or wealth. But these wants mean nothing without action. For any of the issues prevalent in society, the first step we need to take is to bridge the gap between the people. The pandemic has made obvious and worsened the disconnection, distrust and lack of communication or understanding between politicians and the general public. We need more people in parliament and communities, with the people seeing the real lives behind the numbers, whilst fostering better relationships and humanising politicians. We need to encourage more discourse to bring to light the issues people care about the most and create more public advocacy initiatives and campaigns like this one. Creating more communication and advocacy outlets will allow society to work on the most pressing matters of the people, putting the general public's voice at the forefront of progression. With the voices of the people heard, we will create a future that aligns with the vision of the public, thus achieving the changes in society we hope to see. Whilst I do not expect these changes to occur overnight, I call for intergenerational cooperation for a better, brighter, happier and healthier tomorrow. Thank you, and thank you, Erica, for that. Another person who I just want to recognise their passion and advocacy is another young person from Chifley, Tegan Hodges, who 9 years ago was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, and as she says, living with it is full on. There are no days off and it can and does change hour to hour. She's currently raising the issue of the campaign More Tech for More People, where there are subsidies provided for continuous glucose monitors, but that stops when they reach the age of 21, which means that when Tegan turns 21 mid-next year, she'll have to stump up $4,000 extra to fund this. The use of CGM is crucial in helping people manage blood glucose levels, and type 1 diabetes won't disappear when she turns 21. She's also highlighted that over 1,000 people live with this in the Chifley electorate, 408 will have complications, and there are hundreds that go undiagnosed. And she's rightly pushing parliamentarians to provide further support through the More Tech for More People campaign, and I'll certainly be putting my weight behind that very important initiative. And thank you, Tegan, and to Erica for your advocacy.
I call the honourable member for Parkes.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. Look, today I'd like to congratulate and wish well in their future endeavours the students of the Central West Leadership Academy based out of Dubbo in my electorate. They have won the National Future Problem Solving Finals and qualified the international competition in the United States. Students from the Central West Leadership Academy have been placed first and second in their respective categories in the Future Problem Solving Nationals final this month. The Academy Year 9 team placed first in the Australia for their community problem solving entry Take One Step, where they created a student representative council training manual for student leadership teams to use to combat sexual harassment at school. Year 9 Academy student Noah Randall came second in the nation in scenario writing, a creative writing competition where the story must be set 20 years into the future. Noah wrote a scenario about personalised medicine and its impacts on those who lack access to emerging technology. And it's very comforting to know that these students are thinking to the future. They have a positive outlook for their communities. And so both Academy entries will represent Australia at the International Future Problem Solving Finals at the University of Massachusetts in the USA on the 8th to the 10th of June in 2022. The principal of the Academy, Ms Mandy Randall, was extremely proud of the students' efforts and the outcome they achieved, saying our school values the 6 C's of critical thinking: creativity, citizenship, communication, coding and technology, and collaboration. So I'd like to congratulate the students at the Academy. I'd like to take this opportunity to congratulate Mandy Randall, who has worked so hard to bring this Academy together, understanding that you teach students to their ability, not to their age, and they have shown enormous success for a small school in Western New South Wales to compete against the large sandstone schools in the capital city. In the last few seconds I've got left, I'd like to acknowledge that tomorrow will be the last day of work for Kim Bartley, who's been a journalist for 40 years, a large part of that for the Dubbo Daily Liberal in Dubbo. Kim has great passion and diligence in bringing the stories that matter to the communities of Dubbo and the Far West, and she has a well-deserved retirement coming her way. Kim, all the best. Congratulations on a job well done.
I call the honourable member for Corio.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I'd like to read a speech from Millie McDonald from Cardinia College in my electorate. When my grandfather landed in this country, he had nothing but the clothes on his back and $8 in his pocket. He had fled Yugoslavia's communist regime. For him, freshly 18, Australia was a welcoming, kind, golden country full of promise, hopes and dreams for his future family. I'm now 2 months away from turning 18 and 53 years after my grandfather landed, have my own dreams for Australia. In 20 years, I envision a country that presents everyone with the opportunities of the Golden Country. I see equitable access to education, healthcare and careers that spans gender, race and sexual orientation. I see us upholding our international responsibilities, doing our fair share on climate change, treating those fleeing their homes with kindness and respect, to remember we have boundless plains to share. Our generation's call to action is on climate. We must not see net zero as a threat, but an opportunity. We have an abundance of natural resources. 20 years gives us the chance to become a green energy powerhouse, to create jobs in green energy. We must maintain our rage and enthusiasm for gender equality, for racial equality, for climate justice, for refugees, for our golden country. Millie McDonald is 17 years old. I met her a few weeks ago. She is about to complete Year 12 in just a few weeks' time, and she hopes to study politics next year at the University of Canberra, and she is very excited about her future. When I met her, she was very keen to talk to me about the misogyny speech made by the former Prime Minister Julia Gillard, a speech I was in the House for on that day, which I shared with her. And the speech I read is part of the Youth Voice in Parliament Week project, which is run by Raise Our Voice Australia, which has encouraged a number of young people to write speeches to be read in Parliament, and I'm one of 40 MPs who are participating in this project. It holds a particular resonance for me because a long time ago in the last century. I did my work experience with Senator Olive Zakharov of the other place, and indeed in that week Senator Zakharov asked me to write a speech for her to deliver in the Senate, which she did. I have to say it was heavily edited and not many of my words made it, but I was still really excited about it. I was really excited about it, and it was something of an inspiration for me. So this project allows us to hear Millie's voice as we did, and the fine words, much finer than mine I might say, that she has been able to give us access to today, but it's also something of an inspiration for her.
Order. A division has been called for in the House. The proceedings will be suspended to enable honourable members to attend the division. The proceedings will resume when the Chair of the Federation Chamber is resumed. I call the member for Page.
Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, I'd like to acknowledge Gary McGrath from Casino, who is retiring after more than 42 years of owning and operating Gary McGrath car sales. Gary left school at 15 for an apprenticeship at Con Taylor's Automotive to become a mechanic, and in 1972 he made the switch from mechanic to a car salesperson. He started his own sales yard in 1979. Gary was also a founding member of the Casino Car Club with other, and it was interesting to note the other founding members included Matthew McDonald, the late Noel Murphy and Bill Watson, David Lindsay, John and Ron Frogley, Patrick Vout, Doug Roach, John Morrissey, Bruce Yates, John Groves, Angelo and Tilly Garver. And the club started as a road safety initiative. Gary in 1981 helped to start the Show and Shine car show at the Casino Beef Week. He and Cheryl were married in 1974 and have been business partners for all that time. They have 2 children, Melissa and Matthew, and 3 grandchildren, Hugo, Fletcher and Sterling. Gary, I thank you for your service to our community, and I wish you and Cheryl all the best in retirement. Deputy Speaker, Youghal Bar Station is located nearby Youghal on the beautiful Clarence River and has a long history in our region's agriculture. Youghal Bar is a name used by the local Indigenous people, which means a place of little fishes. The property today is a home to 7,700 cattle and is 35,000 acres. The property has been in the well-known Meyer family for more than 60 years. I'd like today to acknowledge Rob Cinnamon, who for the last 20 years has been the General Manager of Youghal Bar Station. Rob, with the support of his wife Lorraine, have been fantastic leaders in the beef industry in our region and are moving on to pursue their own interests. Rob will continue to sit on the board of Casino Food Co-op and expand their own personal pastoral based in Kyogle. Station Overseer and long-term employee Brett Ellam's going to step into Rob's role with Peter Hay as the farming manager. Congratulations, Rob and Lorraine, and best of luck with your future endeavours. Deputy Speaker, I'd like to acknowledge Michael Moffat, or Moffy as he is fondly known in our community. Moffy is the presenter on Triple M Coffs Coast and was recently announced as a finalist in the Australian Commercial Radio Awards. He has been nominated for Best Entertainment Presenter. He is also a finalist in the Best Station Promotion category for Moffy in the Morning when he did it live from London. As part of this, he travelled to London to broadcast his show from the Strand Palace Hotel. He was on the streets of London daily to record the content for the program before broadcasting live from London time 9 p.m. till midnight. The awards will be held early next year. Good luck, Moffy.
The honourable member for Corangamite.
Deputy Speaker, distressingly in recent months I've seen a significant increase in the number of women in a desperate state who can no longer afford a roof over their heads. Women with young children forced into homelessness and couch surfing. Middle-aged women begging for scarce beds in homeless shelters or sleeping in their cars. Women of all ages left vulnerable to homelessness. These women are contacting my office in desperate need of help. The lack of affordable and social housing for people on low incomes has reached crisis point in my electorate of Corangamite, and it has been exacerbated by the pandemic. Housing prices have skyrocketed in my electorate, with people flocking to escape Melbourne during COVID. They're taking advantage of low interest rates and buying local properties, but the property frenzy is driving up property prices and ultimately squeezing the most vulnerable people out of their rental homes. And the availability of affordable housing for people seeking to work in the region is also becoming a massive issue, especially in coastal towns like Apollo Bay, Lorne, Anglesea and Torquay, and is particularly challenging for our tourism and hospitality sector to attract casuals when there is little accommodation. But it is those people living on very modest incomes, perhaps living on benefits such as disability support or Veterans Affairs pensions, who are hurting the most. They can no longer afford escalating rents. Next week, I'm visiting the local Salvation Army to see for myself the work this organisation is doing to support people in need. Sadly, the Salvos and other organisations are swimming against a massive tide. Data from G21, an alliance of local governments, shows the region needs an extra 6,000 new social housing residences. Similar situations exist right across our nation, yet data released in August by Homelessness Australia shows the Morrison-Joyce government's investment in social housing and homelessness has dropped dramatically. When Labor left office in 2013, the federal government committed $2 billion a year for social and Indigenous housing and homelessness. Adjusted to inflation and population growth, that is about $2.7 billion today. This financial year, the Morrison-Joyce government has only budgeted to spend $1.6 billion. That's a massive cut. In contrast, an Albanese Labor government will create a $10 billion Housing Australia Future Fund to build 20,000 social housing properties. 4,000 of those properties would be for women and children fleeing family violence and older women at risk of homelessness. Deputy Speaker, there could be no starker difference. While the Morrison-Joyce government has turned its back on our most vulnerable Australians, Labor is working hard to reduce homelessness across Australia. Thank you.
Call the honourable member for Riverina.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. The plumpest, the juiciest, the reddest, the best. What am I talking about? Young cherries. Cherries from Young, of course, and we all know that. We all know that. Since 1847, they've been growing the plumpest, the juiciest, the reddest, the best cherries in Young. But I have to say, unless we find 3,000 pickers very soon, when the season starts, the picking season starts on November 1, then the Young cherry growers could be a little bit high and dry. And it is a cause for great concern in that wonderful town. The town of which has a rugby league team. I would almost dare to say it's the only team in Australian Rugby League that the emblem of which is the cherry pickers, of course. Why wouldn't it be the cherry pickers? Mr Speaker, the concerns of the Young cherry growers about the looming harvest labour shortage was raised with me on the 5th of August. I appreciate we did some work last year for this very same reason. COVID has left us many, many backpackers short. Now, Young requires about 3,000 pickers, most of whom are backpackers or professional pickers. And it is a situation which caused us to have a very good teleconference. The Minister for Agriculture in Northern Australia, he zoomed in on this conference. We had Michelle Walton, Samantha Flannery, Joanne Wells, and the member for Cootamundra has also been very much part and parcel of this, was on this teleconference. The Minister, he understands full well that the agriculture visa, which has been put in place by the Nationals and the Liberals, is going to play its part. But we absolutely also need some of those border restrictions, some of those state sanctions restrictions on cherry pickers and the like lifted, so that pickers can come down from Queensland. And of course, often the picking season starts in Queensland. They pick mandarins and other things, and they then come to pick the cherries in Young. And orange as well. They also come to Griffith. They then go down to Tasmania. The pool of labour available to harvest cherries is significantly small, as I say. But thankfully, we've got the Harvest Trail. That's kicking in. I urge any pickers to go to that harvesttrail.gov.au. Indeed, the ag visa is going to play a part, and that's why we have put that in place to ease the concerns of these growers, to ease the concerns of these farmers. Finally, we're going to have another good bumper season. I've had so much with droughts and bushfires and floods and COVID. The farmers are looking towards a bumper harvest. We need the people there. Harvest Trail and Ag Visa is going to play a part in addressing these issues.
Call the honourable member for Lilly.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Gympie Road in my electorate of Lilly acts as both a major highway and a suburban connector road, and it does neither well. Ask any Northsider and they will tell you to avoid Gympie Road during peak hour. It is basically a car park. The 6-lane, 10-kilometre road stretching from the end of the Airport Link tunnel at Kedron through to Beams Road at Castledine is the most congested road in Queensland. Gympie Road regularly dominates state-run surveys and polls about the least safe and most congested roads. Since 2015, Gympie Road has been identified by the RACQ and the AAMI Crash Index as the most dangerous and one of the most congested roads in Queensland. The Morrison government's own infrastructure priority list categorises Gympie Road as high priority. A generation of planning failures has meant that locals living on the north side face daily commuting times 2 to 3 times longer than the same distance from the CBD on the south side, despite not even having to cross the Brisbane River. Drivers must transition from the 100-kilometre 6-lane Bruce Highway directly into a heavily congested, substandard suburban road with traffic lights every few hundred metres and no direct or convenient alternative path into the city. The congestion is only compounded by the second largest shopping centre in Australia, Westfield Chermside, sitting at the corner of Gympie Road and Hamilton Road. In an average day, 100,000 cars travel along Gympie Road. These numbers are only set to skyrocket, with key findings of the North West Transport Network Strategic Assessment found that over the next 20 years, daily road trips in this region are set to increase by 40 to 60%. The first step to fix Gympie Road is to recognise the crucial role it plays as a commuter highway and make it part of the national highway network so it will be eligible for critical federal funding. The second step is for the federal government to start the Gympie Road, Chermside Road project business case that I included in my 2021 Lilly budget submission. Deputy Speaker, 2021 marks 10 years since the Brisbane City Council delayed their promised upgrade to the Brighton foreshore because of the Brisbane floods. Now, a decade on, the upgrade remains unfunded, despite countless community petitions and consistent local advocacy from representatives such as Councillor Jared Cassidy. Disappointingly, the Morrison government rejected my funding request on behalf of our community in the 2021 Lilly budget submission, but my fight continues. I invite Northsiders to sign my petition calling on the Brisbane City Council and the federal government to deliver the funding for a much-needed upgrade to the Brighton foreshore. It is an essential element of recreation for Northsiders, particularly those in Brighton and Sandgate on the weekends. It encourages healthy living, active. Our birds live there, our dogs love it. Upgrade the Brighton foreshore.
Call the honourable member for Grey.
Thank you very much, Mr Deputy Speaker. I was very pleased with the news this morning, I think late yesterday afternoon, in fact, that the state government in South Australia has now set an open-up day, if you like, of November the 23rd, when we are expected to reach the target of 80% fully vaccinated for those over the age of 16. We are currently 63.1% and 79.6% first dose vaccinated, and we can pretty easily extrapolate that we're a little over 3 weeks from first dose to second dose, with not many people using AstraZeneca at this stage. And I'd have to say that's a little disappointing in a way, because of course we've reached, I think, the point of 85% fully vaccinated in New South Wales at the moment. So in reality, South Australia is about 6 weeks behind. I think this is probably the penalty for success. It easily argued, I think, that because we haven't had the chronic outbreaks or the outbreaks of the coronavirus in South Australia, that we've been a little less desperate to get vaccinated. In fact, there are no new cases as of yesterday. There are 2 active cases. Both of those came in on aircraft, as far as I know. We have 0 community transmission. There have been 918 cases in total for the whole pandemic, and just 4 people have succumbed, and that were in the early days. So it is clearly an outstanding result. So on the 23rd of November, borders will open, and those that are fully vaccinated, and that remains an incentive for those people who are not fully vaccinated or not vaccinated at all to get on the bandwagon, but they'll be allowed to come in to South Australia unless they're from an LGA that has less than 80% vaccination, or from one that is a hotspot without isolating. And I'm looking forward to that, because I will be in isolation by tomorrow night. But the next time I come to Canberra, I'll be able to go home, hopefully, and not isolate. But I want to just dwell a little bit on the national scene, where there's been a lot of criticism of the government's vaccination program. At various times by those opposite and in the press and others, it's been described as bungled, botched, failed, a shambles. And I look back, and it was Greg Hunt that first said in November last year that we'll have Australia vaccinated by the end of October. Well, if we've missed it, Mr Deputy Speaker, if we've missed the end of October, we've only missed it by that much. And in fact, despite all that rubbish that was piled upon the government and the obstacles that those and the other side of politics actually put barriers in the way and destroyed the confidence in AstraZeneca vaccine, we have met that target.
I call the honourable member for Cooper.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Well, the previous Speaker might be surprised to hear my speech now, because I rise to inform the House of the people who've slipped through the many cracks of the Morrison government's so-called COVID-19 safety net. It was developed in a way that actively excluded people like university staff and overseas-owned companies like Donata. But I have spoken in my electorate to uni students and young people who didn't qualify for JobKeeper, even though they had some 2 or 3 jobs, like my constituent Matthew, who worked in both retail and hospitality before lockdown, but was denied JobKeeper after losing all his jobs. And because he didn't meet the 12-month continuity requirement, he couldn't get the payment. He had never been out of work. And Deputy Speaker, these young people like Matthew have bills. They pay rent, they have to feed themselves and keep their homes warm in winter. They were left behind. And another constituent, Anna, contracted COVID some weeks ago. Her whole family caught it, including her 13-year-old daughter. And tragically, her father passed away from the virus. She paid for her father's funeral with the disaster payment she received, and she was grateful for that. But after getting COVID, she still had symptoms. She was exhausted and too weak to get out of bed. She coughs persistently. She has muscle pains and is too sick to return to work. However, despite her extended sickness, she couldn't access any further disaster payments from Centrelink. According to the government, she had recovered and must go back to work. But what else could she do? She's a single mum. She has a daughter to provide for. Not only has the government's safety net failed Anna, but it has exposed that they failed to account for the impacts of long COVID. The World Health Organisation recently released a standard definition of long COVID. The condition can last for months, and studies show that around 1 in 3 people with COVID-19 will have symptoms longer than the typical 2 weeks. How is the Morrison government working to prepare our health and welfare systems for people who are experiencing long COVID? When will the government put people first? Now, Deputy Speaker, I'd like to briefly tell the House about an extraordinary nurse, a long-time colleague of mine who retired this month after 46 years, Miss Ida Edney. She began her nursing career in Perth at the Royal Perth Hospital, and she was nursing there when Cyclone Tracy hit Darwin and cared for the injured. She moved to Sydney in 1979, working in and managing aged care facilities. Then in 1985, she began the rest of her working life in Melbourne at the Austin Hospital, where I also worked. What an amazing nurse Ida is. A trailblazer. She nursed the first liver transplant patient at the Austin Hospital, helping refine protocols and care for transplant patients thereafter. In 1997, Ida became the nurse unit manager of the endoscopy unit there, where when she started it was a burgeoning area of medicine, and Ida set about modernising the practices, the environment and patient care. After 46 years of nursing, she's left, and I'm proud to call her my friend.
The honourable member for Lindsay.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. Electric buses, windows, doors, trucks, coffee and masks. This is what Aussie Made is in my electorate of Lindsay. And like 97% of Australians, we know that Aussie Made means local jobs. 95% of us know it also means high-quality products. But now is the time that we put that knowledge into action and actually buy Aussie-made. Local businesses have been doing it tough over the pandemic, but thanks to the hard work of Australians keeping each other safe and getting vaccinated, and proudly I'm up into the 90s in my electorate of Lindsay for our first dose. We're opening up and businesses are getting back to doing what they do best. That's great news for our economy and every Australian who wants high-quality, safe, homegrown, locally made products that support businesses to create and sustain more local jobs. People in my electorate of Lindsay know this well because we're in the heart of Western Sydney, and Western Sydney is the heartbeat of Australian manufacturing. There are almost 700 manufacturers in my community, and 95% of them are small businesses. And I want to see this number grow, and that's why I am proud to be supporting our local businesses that are employing apprentices and trainees, and out and about I see manufacturers employing young female apprentices, and they're proud of this, and it's wonderful to see more women getting into these non-traditional workforce, into these jobs. Across Australia, there are 1 million people employed in manufacturing. In the last year, more than 100,000 new manufacturing jobs were created in sectors like food, machinery, equipment, transport and fabricated metal production. Something that I'm really excited to see, and there is so much for potential in Western Sydney, is around new manufacturing and advanced manufacturing, around medical, and also supporting agribusiness. And I'm super excited that we have Sydney Science Park coming into my electorate. And this will mean more kids educated and trained in STEM and taking on science, and increasing our future manufacturing capabilities in Western Sydney. So we're backing manufacturers in Western Sydney. I will always support them 100%, so they can grow their business, they can buy new equipment, take on more apprentices, create more jobs, which is absolutely essential, and thrive in our new era of Australian manufacturing. Thank you.
I call the honourable member for Sturt.
Thank you, Mr Acting Deputy Speaker. I move that the Federation Chamber do now adjourn.
I second the motion.
The question is that the motion be agreed to. All of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
To the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The Federation Chamber stands adjourned until 10 a.m. on Thursday, the 28th of October 2021.